All right, well, I'm Joe Schiavo, class 2012. Happy to have everyone here and glad to see you're all interested in learning a little bit more about what we do. And the way I'm gonna run this is I want each of our mentors to introduce themselves first. And then I have a couple of questions for us to kick around together, and then I'd love to open it up just to hear, uh, what all of your questions are. And we're all open books and want to be as helpful as possible as you think about what this career and what this sector may look like for you. So for introductions, I'd like our mentors to, along with saying, what you work on now, to tell us a little bit of your story. So talk about, how your career journey began and how you developed interest in, maybe the different jobs that you've had over time and sort of take us up to where you are today. Um, so with that, maybe Kathy, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, I would be happy to. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Kathy Elsesser, and thank you, Joe. And it's nice of you guys to join us on a Saturday afternoon. I am a partner at the firm Goldman Sachs. I live in New York City. I have 3 kids, husband, and 2 Wheaten Terriers. My daughter is a freshman at Vassar, about to return to campus. Um, what does it mean to work at Goldman Sachs? I work in the investment banking division, and I run our consumer, retail, and healthcare businesses on a global basis. And what that means is I spend my time working with clients and advising them, giving them advice on their management teams, their board constructs, but more importantly, and certainly earlier in my career, on raising different types of capital, be it equity or debt, or private capital, or buying and selling assets on their behalf. So my goal is to give them the best advice in order to grow businesses, to create jobs, and to sort of extend the reach of various branded consumer products companies. I got to where I am today virtually, well, put it this way, I would not have been sitting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon my sophomore year of college at all. I went to Boston College. I was a psychology major. I had a management concentration. I wanted to become a lawyer. I really did not expect to live in New York City. I really did not expect to be at Goldman Sachs for 31 years and a partner for 18. So if you are sitting there thinking that it's some straight path and it was easy to figure out, it's really not. And you kind of have to go with your gut. At any rate, I went to Goldman after my undergrad. I spent 2 years, sort of loved, sort of hated it. Decided to go to Kellogg Graduate School, where I wanted to focus on brand management. I thought it would be more creative, more interesting, and in many ways it is. But for me personally, it wasn't quite the fit that I wanted. So I came back to Goldman, and over time, I was able to marry my 2 passions: one, following consumer trends and economic trends, along with advising clients. At Goldman, I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in our mergers and acquisitions area, our leverage finance area, in our coverage area. So within the firm, I've done a lot of different things, but I've always been at Goldman. Over to you, Joe.
Okay. Mary, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I am Mary Talbot, and I graduated from Vassar in 2016, and now I live in Philly. And I was a women's studies major. And as I've shared, I'm sure the fellow mentors will hear, we'll each hear each other's stories a few times, so I won't feel bad about repeating myself. But I had really no plan going into senior year or throughout senior year for what my job was going to look like. And the week of graduation, I had a friend who had applied at a company called Vanguard, which is where I now work. And she ended up not taking the job, but she passed my name on via email to a recruiter. And so I was able to get an entry level job interview for kind of like one step above basically an inbound call center role. So if you would call customer service at your bank, it wasn't exactly the same, but it was really similar to that. And I almost didn't go to the interview. I didn't think I would get it. And I had missed formal. And I did prep with an econ major friend before my interview. And I got there and actually was really excited about the environment of the company, and I got the job. So that role was again, kind of customer service based, a little more specialized than that. Pretty shortly after getting there, Vanguard is a large investment company for people who have employer plans, meaning a company's 401k where you would save for retirement, and then also people who set up individual investment accounts to save for retirement and other goals. That's what Vanguard does. And I was working with our clients pretty directly, and I wanted to help them more directly with meeting their goals. And so I applied for a program to become a financial advisor in their advice department and took my certified financial planner exam, which is a designation that many advisors have. And since 2018, I've worked with our clients directly as an advisor. So I have an ongoing book of people who I help make sure that they're going to have enough money to retire, make sure they have enough money for education for their children, and a lot of other goals and transitions that come up. So that's sort of my role. It's very relationship oriented. Like Kathy, it's probably the last place actually that I would have seen myself because I'm not very quantitative, but it's ended up being a really good fit for me. It's very collaborative with my team of peers that I work with. They're sort of mentoring up with more tenured advisors. There's mentoring down with me helping people who want to get into my role. And then there's very direct work with clients every day. So I have numerous meetings each day on video and phone with our clients around the country. So that's kind of been my path thus far. And I'm excited you guys are here because it was also a very winding route.
Thanks, Mary. Mike, would you like to go next?
Yeah, great. So I am not a Vassar grad. I graduated from Dartmouth in '86, but my son Reese is a 22. You know, I grew up in the Midwest and went to Dartmouth. I really wanted a liberal arts education, and I wanted to play basketball. So probably my biggest claim to fame was I covered Michael Jordan as a undergraduate. They beat us by 48 points. So memorable but fun. And then I was actually going to business school right after college, which was crazy. It was a horrible decision. But I had gotten into Dartmouth's business school as a senior and was just planning hanging out my senior year, having a good time. And like Kathy and Mary, I don't think I'd be caught dead in one of these on a Saturday afternoon. So I give you guys a lot of credit. And I got a call from a Dartmouth professor and said, you know, and this is like in April or May. And the professor said, hey, I got a call from this venture capital firm and they're looking for a entry-level person. And, you know, pretty much all the seniors already have jobs. So do you want to go interview? And I said, you know, what's venture capital? I had no idea. And he said, they finance and invest in, startup companies in technology. And that sounded kind of neat. So I went and interviewed and got the job and really loved it. And really my entire career, the last 30 years has been very much in the entrepreneurial space. I know this is kind of a finance panel, but I really, understand finance. I went to, business school, but I really think of myself more as somebody that works with entrepreneurs and, helps build things. I actually started my own firm 6 years ago, so I get to be kind of an entrepreneur in building this business. We're probably the fastest growing venture firm in the US. And, I get to meet amazing people every day that are building things, and that, that's really exciting and fun. So I've kind of found a really good fit for me. And I think that's a theme that you'll hear a lot, which is over time, just trying to get closer to what you like and are good at. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Joe.
Thanks. Richard, how about we hear from you next?
Richard B. I was a master class in 2006. I was a physics major at Vassar. I actually did the dual degree undergrad program between Dartmouth and Vassar. I spent 3 years at Vassar, 2 years at Dartmouth. Got my BA in physics from Vassar and a BE in mechanical engineering from Dartmouth. So like many people before me, I also had a bit of a circuitous route to finance. I obviously started off being in the science technical side of things. Always thought that I was going to go into engineering or scientific research, and really didn't think about anything related to finance or business at all for a long time, until the very end of my undergrad, when I just had a really bad experience with a co-op internship that I did at IBM. I was a wafer etch engineer at IBM back when they still had a really big wafer etching facility in East Fishkill. I worked there for 6 months while going to school full time. I just really hated the job, and it was very eye opening for me. That it helped me realize that I'm not well suited for a lab environment. I'm a people person. I like working in teams. I like learning from other people and being in collaborative environments. And I like being exposed to different things every day. And sort of that was not how the tech world was, at least back in 2005, 2006, right? When that was before tech was dominated by the Amazons and Netflix and Facebooks of the world. Right? Back then, sort of, IBM was one of the more prestigious names tech field, and it was very old school, hierarchical, and I was not a good fit for that environment. So just through a series of internships, I then tried consulting next. Did not like consulting, but I liked the exposure to finance because I interned at a firm that specialized in management strategy consulting for the financial services industry. Called Mercer Oliver Wyman, which then they've since then merged with Oliver Wyman, with Mercer to become Oliver Wyman. And that led me to the next internship, which I interned at a distressed debt hedge fund. And that really piqued my interest in finance. I loved, my timing was great too. I graduated into the great financial crisis, which, it's not great for an employment prospect, but was good in terms of having worked at a distressed debt hedge fund right when the credit crisis was happening. I just fell in love with investing and I really thought, I want to be an investor. This is the path I want to go. So after I worked at the distressed debt hedge fund for 9 months, which is sort of more of an internship still, I finished my Dartmouth bachelor's. I also got a master's at Dartmouth as well, in master's in engineering management. I then went into investment banking, did 2 years in M&A investment banking, and then went to private equity, which is sort of a very natural path these days for people who want to pursue private equity. So I did investment banking at the Blackstone Group in the M&A group, which has since then spun off into PJT. And then I went to my first private equity job was at a PE firm in San Francisco called Hellman & Friedman. And again, really loved private equity, thought it was a perfect fit for what I was interested in. And then after that, I again started to follow more of the traditional private equity career path, which is 2 years of investment banking, 2 years of private equity, then went to business school, and then I went back to private equity. I went to went back to San Francisco and worked at a PE firm called FFL Partners. I was there for 3 years, decided that I wanted to move back to New York, which is where I'm from, and my wife's family is also on the East Coast. So then I joined the private equity group at the Blackstone Group, which is which I think today is still the world's largest private equity firm. And I think about in 2019, I decided that I wanted to strike out on my own. So a little bit similar to my experience, that I felt like instead of working in this large fund, I wanted to start my own firm essentially, and also be a little bit more involved with the operations, right? Because I think as I gotten older, what I've come to realize that I really enjoy the people aspect of things. I really enjoy, teaching and mentoring younger generations. I enjoy working in teams, managing people. So I wanted to combine both the investment experience and acumen that I've developed through the 12 years or so I worked on Wall Street with more hands-on operational experience. So I decided to leave to start my own independent sponsor / search fund, a firm called Polaris LLC. And that was in mid 2019 that I decided to leave private equity. And I'm happy to talk more about how search funds work for people who are interested. But I actually had several Vassar interns that worked for me throughout the process. I was able to close my first platform deal at the end of 2019. Not the best timing, obviously, given COVID happened, but I think it's been a really good experience so far. I'm about a little more than a year into owning and running that company as a CEO, and just did my second add-on acquisition earlier this month. So again, it's a sort of a mix of investment and management that's a little bit similar to sort of what Mike was looking to do, and I think it's been a very good fit for me. And one thing I would say is just, as you guys think about what you want to do for your career, and certainly you're getting off to a great start by starting that process now, right? I think I encourage all of you to really think about what role you want to play in the greater value chain of finance, right? Because finance is all about connecting people, connecting companies, and connecting resources. And you can have two roles on opposite ends of that value chain that look completely different. So it's not don't think of it as a sort of a pigeonhole role that's stereotypical of what you see in Wolf of Wall Street or Money, or movies like that. There are roles that can range from what Mary was saying. It's not quantitative at all. It's extremely relationship driven. It's about building relationship, building trust. It's about understanding your client's needs and providing that sort of high end, high touch service. You can also be at the other end where you're basically a quant jock, right? That's just crunching numbers. So don't ever think that just because you're X major, you're not, you don't have what it takes to be successful and have a great career in finance. All right, I'll stop there.
Thanks. So Elizabeth, do you know if Quasi is able to join us? I don't see in the tiles here.
I muted myself during the talk. I have not had an update on him not coming, but he clearly isn't here. So I think we can assume that he must have had something come up.
All right, no worries. So I'll now bring up the rear and tell my story. I graduated from Vassar in 2012, international studies major, which I picked out of kind of a dual interest that I discovered and developed while I was at Vassar. And the first was that I am passionate about the issue of climate change, and I always wanted to work on that, and energy in particular as part of it. And the second is that I've always sort of had kind of a proclivity for thinking about things from a business perspective. So I've always thought that business and finance are tools that you can use to solve problems in the world, and it's a way to have some impact on whatever problem or sector or group of people that is interesting to you. For me, that was always energy and the environment. So coming out of Vassar, I went the consulting route because I wanted to develop that business skill set. So I went to work for IBM. So Richard and I have that in common. I was in their consulting group and worked with all different kinds of clients. So I worked for pharmaceutical companies and cruise lines and big banks. So it was kind of like a trial by fire intro to a lot of different things. And thinking about business problems from a lot of different perspectives. So having done that for a couple of years, I kind of reflected on what my original two goals were coming out of Vassar, and I felt like I had really nourished well that business part of it, but I wanted to now pivot to a career that would allow me to bring that energy and environmental piece into what it is I was doing. So I went to Yale for graduate school, and I did a joint degree. I did an MBA, and I did a Master of Environmental Science because I felt that I wanted a more robust skill set and honestly some more credibility to go tell my next employer, I'm serious about both of these things, and I can do the business part and I can do the energy and environment part. So as I kind of reflected on what I wanted to do and my coursework at Yale and my conversations with the Vassar network and with the other networks I had developed, I discovered investment banking as being a wonderful mix of those things. So what I do now, I work at Morgan Stanley in the Global Power and Utilities Group. And in a somewhat similar role to what Kathy does, I talk to all of our clients in that sector about their strategy, about mergers and acquisitions, about how they raise debt and equity. And I get to talk to everyone from small entrepreneurs working on clean technologies and the next big thing to solar and wind developers. And then, of course, like the big regulated utilities and gas-fired power plants. I get to sort of see it all. And I feel like, at least for now, because our goals always change throughout our careers, and we may make it sound linear when we tell you this now, but it truly never is. But for now, it's, it's checking those boxes, and that I feel like I am able to have some impact and talk to leaders in the space, and all the while get to use those business and quantitative and financial skills that I've always sort of gravitated to. So that's my story.
Joe, you only made
Yes.
one mistake.
What is that?
You should have come to Gold.
Wouldn't that be nice? We'll just we're competitors, but we'll lay down the swords for this conversation here. So we all gave sort of a very high level intro of what it is, or why we do what we do. I think it would be helpful to go around briefly and each talk about, like, it's we obviously can't do exact day to day, but what's like something that you do regularly in your job that you think captures it well. Let's try that. Mary, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. So as I said, my role is as a financial planner or advisor, and it's a mix. It's mostly meeting with clients. And so I have a set amount of clients that I can have that are my clients, and I'm both building that up, and then I'm sort of midway through the process of having as many clients as I can take on. So I have meetings throughout the day, and they're usually either introductory meetings with people who are considering using our management service, or meetings with clients that I've already enrolled and I already have a relationship with. And just to give a little bit of context, Vanguard has an established management service. And so they have a set of investment methodology, sort of a set of rules and a way that they do things that I'm communicating to the clients and sort of executing for them. So it's a little bit different than if you were a financial advisor working for yourself, where you might have your own philosophy that you created. And that works really well for me because, as I said, I'm more interested in the people side and the personal finance side of helping people make good decisions, right? And learn techniques and strategies like where to save and how much to save and things like that. So that works really well for me because it's very structured. So there's an entire kind of infrastructure around my planning, and I work with a lot of other peers and advisors, and we do things similarly, but we have different backgrounds. So I have those meetings throughout the day, and it's really fun. I mean, you get to ask people, you're hearing entire life stories of really interesting people. And you kind of get to ask those questions within 3 minutes of meeting them if you're doing your job right. And so I'm working with people. It's also pretty meaningful because there's a lot of times when someone's coming to you, they're at a pivotal point in their life, right? I often work with people right after their spouses have died. I work with people when they're sort of have really accumulated. They've sort of got to the point where they've accumulated a lot after a lot of hard work. They're getting a divorce. There's just a lot of really key moments that I get to be a part of for people. And it's pretty powerful, some of the conversations that you have. So I have those meetings either to just meet for the first time, tell them what we do, see what they need help with, help them with an existing question or have a check-in. And then there's also sort of the more corporate or team-based part of what I do. As I said, I sort of mentor and help interview prep for people who are wanting to come into our group. And I also collaborate with my peers a fair amount. So our group is often introducing new tools that we need to learn about together. There are people on my team who are much more knowledgeable than I am, who've been here longer. And so I may have meetings with them to run client situations by them. So that's sort of the bulk of my day is meeting with clients or doing back-end stuff to maintain client portfolios or responding to client emails, and then meeting with my team. So that's sort of what a typical day in the life looks like for me.
Thanks. Mike, maybe we can hear from you next.
Yeah, venture capital is about investing in new companies. So a lot of our day is really meeting with entrepreneurs, kind of hearing their pitch. Friday we're making an investment in a company, and just working out how we can add value to the company beyond the capital. Capital in our industry right now is kind of a commodity. So the most interesting ventures, again, it's a lot about relationships. How can you understand where their pain points are and how you can help them succeed? you know, it's very interesting. I think the parts of my job that I like best is it's really an opportunity to kind of learn something new every day. You know, I tend to kind of be drawn to new technology or new business models or new ways of doing things. Really an amazing group of people. Entrepreneurs are really passionate, willing to take risks, kind of put it all on the line. So, you know, my day is really filled with hearing their stories. And then really being able to empathize with some of the challenges they face. You know, building businesses are, you know, it's really hard. And it gets romanticized a bit, but it's a lot of, you know, day-to-day grind and getting better. And then the other part of my day is just building our own organization. You know, we're only 5 years old, but you know, we've grown kind of 50% a year. So it's hiring new partners, you know, building offices. So, you know, the variety is something that I really appreciate and like as well. So that's my day.
Thanks. Richard, you want to talk to us next?
Sure. So one of the things I love the most about finance in general, but also private equity in particular, which is the path I've been on, is that your role is not static, right? Your role is constantly changing. It's very similar to what Mike just talked about. So I'll also just walk through my progression, which I think is probably what's most relevant, you know, to the current sophomores. So when I was at the entry level, my role was an analyst, right? So I started off as an analyst when I was in banking, when I was at the distressed debt hedge fund. The role is very much analytical, as the name suggests, right? You're sort of at the bottom rung of the organization, and your task is mainly to execute the analytical aspects of the work stream, right? So on the M&A front, it's about building financial models. It's about putting together presentations, right, to pitch the client. It's about you know, doing various financial analyses and analyze returns, analyze impact on stock prices, analyze various financial ramifications of transactions, right? Whether it's buying another company, selling yourself, issuing stock, issuing debt. I think all of these financial transactions require some underlying analytical foundation to help the senior level management of the companies make the right decision, right? So again, your role is typically the most junior rung in the team, and you're responsible for all the analytical work and putting together presentations. So and then when I went to private equity, I became an associate, which it's still sort of you know, at the low level of the investment team process. So it's still responsible for a lot of the analytical process, but being an associate in private equity, you also start to have management responsibility, right? So managing investment bankers, managing consultants, managing other mostly outside resources to collaborate on a transaction, which we call deal teams. And then when I was promoted to vice president, the role took a very major change, right? So no longer was analytical endeavors the center of my work. I mean, you know, my focus became sort of, you know, what people in the industry call the deal quarterback, right? Like you're the person that's really responsible for executing and directing traffic, right? To make sure that the due diligence process proceeds smoothly, to make sure that you identify what areas, you know, to focus, and you're managing the associates and again other advisors, consultants, you know, lawyers, etc., to make sure that everyone is doing the right thing at the right time, and the work is falling into pieces to help you get towards answering the overall goal is, which is oftentimes, should we make this investment and how much is the company worth, right? And how should we make the investment? And then when I went to Blackstone, I was eventually promoted to principal, and then my role changed again, right? So one step further removed from managing further removed from the analytical process, because at that point there's basically a VP and an associate and analyst underneath me. So my role is much more working closely with the senior partners to to identify the investment trends and opportunities, to go source these opportunities, and then sort of set up the overall blueprint on a particular deal to help to give guidance for the other people on the deal team towards executing these due diligence processes and deal structuring, et cetera. So again, the role becomes even more management oriented. The focus shifts to more bigger picture, setting the tone, setting the direction of the diligence process. And then lastly, when I obviously left to start my own firm, the role shifts further where I'm entirely responsible for what deals to pursue, how to pursue those transactions, and making the final decision on what company I would like to invest in, right? And then also, and then being more of a startup firm where there certainly isn't going to be the kind of infrastructure that I would have at a place like Blackstone. You start to wear many hats, right? Just like I'm sure when Mike started at AVG, he was wearing many hats and sort of being in that role of having to be ultimately responsible for the overall success and directions of his company. So again, it's this continuing trend of taking on more responsibilities, taking on a bigger role, and having more direct influence on exactly the direction of the group, team, the company. So, and I think that's one of the beauties of finance, right? Is that your role's not static. You're constantly evolving, constantly developing your skill sets. And when you get to a point where you feel very comfortable with what you're doing, there's more for you to take on, more for you to do. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more for me to learn, especially now that I'm spending, at least at this time especially, spending more than half my time focusing on running my companies, right? So then sort of I'm further now being exposed to the company management aspects of the entire work process, and I'm still learning every day, and I don't think I'll ever stop learning.
Thanks. Kathy, would you like to talk to us next?
Yeah, I think what Richard said was really a great overview of sort of the different levels that a finance track can take you. I guess one thing I think just would be important for you all to understand, which I wouldn't have understood in your shoes, is the difference between a principal and an agent. So for the most part, what Mike and Richard do are they're principals. They invest directly in a company and therefore they own them. What Joe and I do, and to some degree Mary, we're more agents. We give advice and we don't take an ownership stake in companies for the most part. So it's a slightly different perspective because my role is much more about the advice side. It just so happens that if I looked at my day, no one day is as you would expect. And that's something that I really didn't like when I came out of college. I liked the syllabus. I liked to know what I was going to do. And when I got to investment banking at the ripe old age of 19, like every day was crazy and I never knew what was happening. And I kind of loved and hated that, to be honest with you. I guess I loved it more than I hated it because I'm still there. But importantly, I think what you're hearing from folks is that if I had heard finance as a sophomore, I would have thought like, oh, calculus and trigonometry. I don't even know what I would have thought, but it's really the math you're doing in college is probably harder than any math you'll do outside in the world of finance, unless you go into some very esoteric area. It's a lot more about relationships. It's a lot more about your gut instincts. It's a lot more about you can't be the most analytic. You can't be the most interpersonal. You can't be the best speaker. You can't just be collaborative. You kind of have to be all those things. And I think as, Richard described the evolution of a career from being very analytical to now running his own firm, you can see how those qualities have to evolve over time. And I think what you're hearing about all of our experience is that we've had that opportunity to evolve those skills. And what I would say about the finance world, broadly defined, whether agent, principal, private equity, VC, banking, private wealth management, the pace is quick. And so you can keep up with the pace. The good news is the jobs can evolve fairly quickly and the responsibilities can evolve fairly quickly. And I would say for my friends, both from business school and undergrad, who went into more of a corporate track or business track within a corporation, pace can be different. So one thing you just want to think about as you think about business or whatever it is you might you might consider, think about who you are. What do you like? Like, why did you love that English class? Was it just because of the professor and the way that professor taught? Well, then you want to find people to work with who are like that professor. Was it the content of the class? You know, was it that in accounting, for me, when for a summer class, I took accounting, I was like, wow, I really liked getting an answer. Like that was very satisfying to me. And then I realized it's kind of boring to always get the answer. And so I realized that, you know, I needed a mix of all these different things. So for me, as I've told you, I'm more at the top of the advisory area where I talk to CEOs every day or on the weekend, just about whatever's on their mind. It may sound silly to some of you, but being a CEO can be a really lonely place. And I've known a lot of these CEOs for more than a decade as they have moved from company to company and grown up in their individual companies. I work with huge multinational companies like Walmart, Procter and Gamble, or CVS. I also work with entrepreneurs. Ethan Brown, for any of you who may know that name, when his company had about 50 million in sales, his company is Beyond Meat. And I had the pleasure of helping that company public. And for him, it wasn't about selling more veggie burgers. It was about changing the way we think about health and food and how we treat our environment. So a very, you know, passion oriented focus from Ethan, and the public markets were a way for him to tell that story on a much bigger scale. So I have the pleasure of working kind of on a barbell, both with entrepreneurs and with big complicated multinationals. And then I also have the advantage of, we have a $400 million fund within the investment bank that we as partners invest on behalf of up and coming companies. So we sort of dabble in Mike's world, just not nearly as well as he does in investing in high growth companies.
Thanks.
There.
Can I just wanted to build on something Kathy was saying too, which is, I think sometimes, I think when I was your age, I probably would have said finance was for like economics majors or something. And I think you hear from everybody just the value of really a liberal arts education like you get at Vassar, the ability to think, communicate, empathy, some of the things that a good liberal arts education teaches you is really the most important thing in most careers, in my opinion, but especially true in finance. As mentioned, the math is really, it's mostly arithmetic from high school. It's not terrible, maybe a little statistics, but the skills that really differentiate are really ones that I find are really suited to kind of the education you get at a school like Vassar, and the other things you can learn. And again, a lot of people somewhere along the line, may go and get an MBA. That's a common but not always path for people in finance. But don't write it off just because you're not a econ major either, right? And just so many jobs are changing so quickly. Again, a couple of us on the call have seen some changes, and there was no internet when I started out. There was no iPhones. There was, and that rate of change, if anything's accelerating, and whole new industries, whole new jobs you can't even imagine. Beyond Meat is one example of the kinds of things that happen that you can't just anticipate will evolve. So you just kind of head in the right direction and then take it day by day.
I agree with that, Mike. The one thing I would add for all of you is there is one thing that will never be disintermediated, and every single one of us use the word relationships. And so, maybe I'm not traveling to see my clients right now because of COVID, but building the trust and the relationship over years, that's what matters. No trading application can take the place of that, and the trust that Joe needs to have in order to advise his clients, or Mary. And I know, because I turn a lot of my clients, after I take them public, I turn them over to someone like Mary. And it is like one of the most important things that they do, is how they then preserve their wealth, both for their benefits, for charities, for their families. And so those relationships and aren't going to be taken lightly. And so as you build your relationships, with your own peers on campus, and you move into whatever realm, the relationships, technology can further them, but they can't take the place of them.
Thanks for all those perspectives. And where I want to kind of build on that by just making sure that we are able to sort of give you a picture of what all the different possibilities are, because I think we represent, among this small group of mentors, actually a very wide spread of what the different jobs are related to just this big concept of finance that you can be involved in. But there are others. So I want to throw out one that I see missing from this group, and I'd love for our mentors to jump in with others. And that's the idea that you might not work for a bank or a venture capital firm or a private equity firm, but you can work for a company, and you can, from within inside a company, be on a strategy team. You can work in a CFO's office, and you can deploy a lot of the same analytical skill sets, a lot of the same relationship building, a lot of the same need to solve big problems for companies that we sort of deal with in our jobs on a day-to-day basis, perhaps more stereotypically so. So that's one idea. Mentors, any others that you would suggest that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
I think the only other one, look, we're all sort of in various realms of financial services. I think the corporate side is a really good one, because a lot of us work with the corporate side. The other one, is trading, which is, part of financial services, but obviously much more transactional. Don't buy GameStop.
Yeah, the other thing there's the whole kind of fintech area. There's a lot of technology companies always trying to disintermediate, bring a new approach. So there's raw startups dealing with some niche within financial services. That is also a huge industry right now, whether it's payments or trading or any of those things. There's always innovation kind of nipping at the heels of established companies in finance. I'd probably put that in the mix as well as an option.
I can speak a little bit to the kind of working for a company, in the finance and accounting or strategy side, because Vanguard is a huge company. So I think it may be fair to say it's the most corporate, kind of conventional corporate model on the panel. And what I mean by that is I started there not knowing what I wanted to do in a client-facing role, which most of you, if you're willing to speak on the phone, could probably do, right? I would agree that I learned what I was taught when I arrived. And I had done the phone-a-thon, which I would recommend at Vassar, because it's really hard. But I actually think that's why I got my job, because I knew how to have smooth sounding conversations on the phone. And there was a mock phone call in my Vanguard interview. And even though I didn't know what a stock or bond was when I went into the interview, I had to be prepped on that. It didn't really matter, because I was kind, I was friendly, I was polite. I had a smooth manner on the phone in my practice interview, and I had practiced so much, because I will say for myself that once I got that opportunity, I think a part of me realized, like, I really want to do well in this. This is kind of my chance, right? So I had practiced a lot. I went into the interview, and I started, I'll just give you a little bit of an example. I started at Vanguard with, I got lucky enough to start with 3 other women in my same role that had also sort of either career changed or come from other fields. And we ended up becoming really close friends and are still friends. And each of them has taken a very different path. So I really liked the client side. I went into a program to become an advisor. I went much deeper on personal financial planning, which I would say, like, I don't even know what a lot of the other mentors are talking. Like, I'm learning, listening to them. That's not my area that I work in. I work much more in personal finance. You can think about like budgeting, IRAs, which is a type of retirement account, strategies like that. So that's what I was learning. Another friend went into learning and development. So she leads a team of people that help our advisors with their continuing education. So you could do that at a law firm. She could take that skill somewhere else, right? She's kind of a leader, and she drives educational initiatives at our company. Another friend has gone into talent and diversity, right? So she works with hiring people and making sure that our kind of the faces that are being hired are more representative, because that's something that we're pretty good at lower levels, but not as good at higher levels. So she works on talent and diversity and hiring. And then the third friend is a manager of a call group in education savings. So there's a particular group that takes a certain type of inbound calls. She manages a huge team of entry-level people. So she's in a leadership role that she could take to another company. So it just give you that spread, right? We all started in the same place. None of us had a finance background. And because it's an enormous company with a huge infrastructure, somebody could have gone into HR, somebody could have gone into accounting, somebody could have gone, I mean, there are completely finance unrelated roles that we would have had the opportunity to network or work our way into over time. And again, because it's such a large group, I may or may not stay there my whole career, but I could, right? I could grow for my entire career at that company. So I think if you're unsure of what you want to do, company culture and a large company that has a lot of opportunities is a really great place to start, even if you get what you feel is a terrible job there to start, because getting a really good job somewhere that's extremely specific and small can hem you in a little bit more. So that's kind of what I would say is, when we're thinking about broad scope, if you don't know what you want to do, but you think you want to do that industry, selecting a large financial services firm or even another type of company, if you can get an entry-level role there, that can be a really, really great place to branch from.
I mean, I think one of the things, I don't know what other people feel about this, but you know, I think as you're starting out in a career, just learning what you don't want to do is just as valuable. So the jobs I've had that I've really hated are really valuable too, because you know, you have all these choices. It's one of the great things about our systems is, and you're going to have a great education. You're going to have choices. Do I want to live in a city? Do I want to live? How hard do I want to work? What kind of boss do I work best with? What am I good at? And then the opposite. What kind of work do I hate? Where do I have the, you know, it's Sunday night, 5 o'clock, and I'm dreading tomorrow? You know, you don't know until you kind of try stuff. And so, you know, it's, you know, everything is a chance to learn and experiment. And, you know, what I encourage my kids, I have a couple that are a little older than you, which is, you know, try stuff and try different places to live, big company, small company, jobs that are more about the people. Some are a little more about kind of the work or the analysis. You know, kind of over time, you try to veer again towards stuff you like and are better at. And the chances of your first job being perfect are really, really low. But if you can just say, hey, I hated that. I don't want to do that again. Either I don't like living in the city, or this company was too big and I felt like a cog. Sometimes it's what you hate can be as valuable as what you love.
Yeah, I just would love to pick up on that for a second, because not obviously, but we hire about 400 interns a year at Goldman. And then in the entry level analyst role that Richard mentioned. And so, you know, I deal with a lot of kids coming out of college and coming out of grad school. The only thing I would add to what Mike said, which I think is really important, is probably something you're gonna shudder at a tad when I say it, but it is a job. Right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't have fun at your work, but it's kind of hard to find the perfect thing. And I think if you asked any of us on this panel if we did every single day, I don't think you're going to hear us say yes. And so I try to encourage the folks who work for me to think about things in chunks, and everyone has a different perspective on the chunk. And so, for me, it used to be, on a monthly basis, I was a rising woman in a competitive male dominated organization with 3 babies. And if I tried to tell you that every day I absolutely loved what I did and that it was the perfect return on investment, I would be lying to you 100%. But you can have it all. You just can't have it all every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point of it's a career, and if an observation I've made, because we have a good number of younger entry level people, and it's a year into the job, I want to be changing the world, and it takes a while, and you have good jobs and bad jobs, and good weeks and bad weeks, and there's no perfection in life. There's huge setbacks along the way, and it takes a long time to kind of find your way. So just be patient with it as well. And it is a job, and it's only a part of your life, and you're not going to figure it out for a long time, if ever. So, don't be too hard on yourself if your first job really sucks.
I'm going to just jump in now to say to everybody, we're about 25 minutes away to when we go to the breakout room style. But students, since we've got the whole panel together now, I just do want to remind you and encourage you that you are welcome to raise your hands if you have a topic or a follow-up that you'd like, that somebody glanced on, but you'd like to hear a little more. So no pressure, but raise your hands, kids. Okay, that's.
Yeah, no, thanks for the reminder, Elizabeth. Let's hear from our sophomores now. What questions can we answer for you?
Well, so while you guys think about questions, I just want to add a little bit of, I think it's important to sort of stress on this, as you think about a potential career in finance, right? Like don't think of finance as one industry. It's actually a really, really large industry that's actually made up of several disparate industries themselves. And I'm actually going to slightly disagree with what Joe said before, that I actually think the parts of finance industry that's represented on this panel is actually only a small corner of the industry. I think in the broad scheme of things, I think it's important for you to understand what finance really is, right? It's not one industry. It's a collection of different industries that all serve around the broader theme of connecting those who have resources and need to invest with those who have investment opportunities who need resources, right? So what it means is on one end, you have, those with resources, which is sort of an industry, a universe unto itself. And then you have those who need resources, who have projects to invest in, who need resources. That's a whole other industry themselves. And then you have intermediaries, like investment banks, they're trying to connect those two. That's a whole other universe. And then you have platforms and technology companies and enablers are trying to facilitate the communication and the transactions, and that's a whole other industry. You also have service providers that provide services to every one of those corners of the. So the reasons you want to think about that is, there is no prototypical profile for what your resume should look like to have a successful career in finance, right? Like a liberal arts education is actually a very good preparation.
We did get a couple of students raising their hands, and
okay, sorry, go ahead.
So, but you're dead on. So Jack and Ryan, we'll just take you in order that we see you in the screen. So Ryan, you can go first, but remember to unmute yourself because you're, as we always are in Zoom, muted at this time.
Hey guys, thanks for being here today. I just had a quick question about business school and sort of, if whatever career in finance you'd sort of decide to go into after undergrad, say it's trading or something else, kind could you always just go to business school a few years in if you don't liking it and sort of make a complete 180 and switch to something else within finance, say something like a corporate role or something in banking?
I'll take a shot at that. So, one thing about business, I've got a couple of thoughts on business school. One is, I think it's, I went and I got my MBA from Harvard, and I had a great time. I learned a lot. I made an incredible group of friends, network. I'm a fan of an MBA. I think it's a tool that will allow you to be more effective in almost anything you want to do. Things I learned, I think made me a better husband, better parent, helping with nonprofits. I think it is a very broad toolkit that you learn at a good in a good MBA program. So I'm a fan. I also think it's something that is best after you've had some experiences. I think, the idea of working for, 4 to 6 years and then go back and get an MBA is a pretty good way to go. Again, it's a lot, there are some things that you can learn like accounting and things like that, that are part of it, but it's really, again, kind of reinforcing decision-making with incomplete information, the people you meet. It is a great kind of career pivot opportunity. I think a lot of people, have tried a few things and they want to kind of maybe move in a different direction, and it's a way to kind of smoothly make that move, right? You kind of go in as a finance person, you leave as a marketer, or you go in as a marketer and you leave as a consultant or something like that. So it is kind of a career transition opportunity for sure. Again, I think it also provides some credentialing. That's a lot of what I think college and universities and graduate schools provide these days is, you learn some things, but it's the network and it's the credential that are really important. So anyway, that's my 3 or 4 minute spiel on an MBA.
One thing I'll add to that as well is, thinking about some of the other themes that this group has hit on, the MBA, or really any graduate school that you pursue in, call it the first 10 years out of Vassar, should make you really fearless about that first job, right? Like it does not have to be perfect, because you're going to have a chance to change paths. And I think the magic of graduate degrees is that they allow you to come back into environments like we're in now, where you can ask all kinds of questions, you can get to know all different kinds of people, and make a really big pivot with your career that's otherwise somewhat challenging to do.
The other thing I would add is back when I went to grad school, at least within banking, you had to get an MBA or a law degree to continue on. It was basically a 2-year program off to grad school and then returning. It's no longer like that. You can have an entire career within the investment bank without ever having to go to grad school. So if you ended up staying there, if you ended up starting there, you could go work your way all the way through. Having said that, I'm in the camp with Mike and Joe that life for me isn't about finding the shortest distance between 2 points. And so grad school for me I'm still in touch with my professors. I sit on the board of Kellogg. I'm very close to the dean. She and I talk regularly. So it's a lot more than just a way to get your foot on another rung on the ladder.
And there's other graduate degrees now that are, computer science, data science, again, those are really popular degrees now in finance and entrepreneurship as well, right? Again, it's you talk a lot about kind of T-shaped people in my business, which is kind of the horizontal part of the T is kind of the liberal arts and ability to learn and communicate, develop relationships, really kind of broad understandings of concepts and patterns. And then if you can complement that by being really good at one thing that you hopefully you really like, which tends to be correlated, that again, that's just one way to think about, you know, how you want to kind of develop yourself, both, you know, kind of a breadth of things. So you're a good flexible thinker and are robust, kind of anti-fragile, but at the same time, there's real value to being really good at one thing. And that again takes a long time to find that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Jack, let's hear from you. What do you have for us?
Yeah, thanks for being here, guys. So as you guys like progressed into your professional careers, like obviously your perspective on like your undergraduate experience definitely changed a lot. So like if you were to look back on your time as like an undergraduate student, what were like some experiences or like opportunities you did take advantage of or like wish you took advantage of, and like other skills that you use in professional career that you wish you developed at like an earlier point?
I mean, I played team sports, and I think, you know, as other panelists point out, the ability to work as a team and to get along with a variety of different people and personality types, I think is really invaluable. So, you know, I look back and some of the lessons I learned, you know, as part of being on a team have really been valuable to me. The risks I took with, you know, kind of taking classes outside my majors, I really, you know, think back to, you know, a Russian literature class I took, and, you know, how some of that writing impacted the way I see the world. So it's just, you know, just a lot of things I think being related to being well-rounded human being, you know, learning to kind of take care of your health and mental health and friendships. There's a lot of pressure, you know, I think there always has been. I think it's probably gotten worse about, you know, you got to do it this way. You've got to get great grades. You got to go to the right school. You've got to, you know, there's a lot of kind of pressure, I think, that is put on doing things a certain way at a certain pace that I think, that I don't think is true. And so there's a little bit of kind of, you know, develop relationships, play, you know, be part of clubs, be part of teams, take that class that interests you, take that term abroad, you know, those kinds of things. I think, you know, and all of my friends, you know, they never regret any of that stuff. Took a term off, took a gap year, you know, those things are, in the trajectory of a long career, I think were always good decisions.
Yeah, I wish I had worried less about getting a job. Because though I described a haphazard approach, it was like largely driven, I think, by self-doubt and just the assumption that I wasn't going to get a particular job in a particular field. And if you're a women's studies major, people just are very rude to you about your job. They're like, you're not gonna, what are you gonna do with that? You know, and Being a well-educated person, as Mike was just speaking to, there's a real maturity and sophistication to that other people are drawn to. Like people at my work will comment on my vocabulary sometimes, right? I wasn't a finance major, a lot of them were, but I love to read and I connect with my clients on that, right? I'm being myself, and I was well educated by Vassar, and that has brought joy to my life, and people respond to that, right? So that's a huge part of it, is just, you're going to get a job. You're getting a wonderful education from world-class professors. Just don't listen to those people that say that it's not true. And the other thing I would say is, it's also very hard to be a student. And Elizabeth and I were talking about this before the panel began. I think being a serious college student is one of the hardest. You know, my work-life balance is better now. And I also have discretionary income, which is kind of a pleasure, right? Which I didn't have in college. And I just remember I worked all the time when I was at Vassar. I did some other things too, right? But it's hard what you're doing. And so I think that general attitude and ethos that college students aren't like equipped for the real world, like, no, I think you're working pretty hard and putting a fair amount of pressure on yourself. So I would just sort of set that to the side to the extent that you can. Because as soon as you can make space for confidence, and I don't mean by that arrogance, I mean by that willingness to go for something, right? Because again, I described not pursuing certain things because of self-doubt. So I don't think I stretched myself in my career seeking prospects enough early on, because I just didn't feel that readiness. Once I got that job at Vanguard, or actually once I got that interview, it sort of sparked something. And I was like, I'm going to practice because I want to get this job. Like, this is my opportunity. So I practiced, I got there. I was really nice to everyone. And that's I'm not trying to be patronizing. Be nice to every single person that you meet, and you can do it in your way. Ask people about themselves, remember the answers. Like, that will take you very far, especially if you're unsure. So I got the job at Vanguard, and that just sparked that, oh my gosh, like, I just have to do it. I just have to try. That it was a real turning point for me that I wish it happened earlier. That led me to, within 6 months, apply for what I thought I wouldn't get, a pretty competitive program to become an advisor, which really accelerated my career. And it also led me to think, no, I can take the Series 7, right? Even though I don't know what a stock is, which is a licensing exam, I can take the Certified Financial Planner designation, right? Even though 2 years ago, I didn't know the basic terms that are in this exam. And I was well equipped to take it because I was a good student. So I think it's sort of, that's really what I would say is, trust your own self-worth. And it doesn't mean that you think you're going to be the best when you first get to your company. It just means that you're willing to step a tiny foot right out, because that's the only way that you're going to progress. And I think had I not gotten that interview at Vanguard, I think I would have spent a while in jobs that were sort of just like the safest possible choice that I could have done. And it just would have taken me longer to get here, right? So I was lucky that that happened to cross my path and it worked out. But that's really my advice, is just try and see those as this spark that get you going, instead of seeing it as this like monolithic, horrible challenge that's ahead of you.
Joe, can I throw in something? Actually, I know I'm not an official mentor, but I really want to add something to what Mike and Mary both just said. And the reason I think it's worth sharing is it doesn't come from me. It comes from my daughter, who's now a junior in college. And we were talking recently about her path in life. And when she was in high school, and she was has to get an A in every class. If she's in a club, she has to be the president, to move on. And because she knew she wanted to apply to competitive colleges like Vassar, and she wanted to get in. All of which is to say, what she turned to me and said the other day was, for a long time in my life, I just tried to do whatever I thought was the best thing, for the only reason that it was the best thing. And I wanted people to know I was the person who did all the best things. And what I have learned over however many years to when she got here is, you have to do the thing you love, not just because it's the most rewarding and satisfying, but because at some point you're going to be in interviews and they want you to tell your story. And your story can't be, I just was trying to do the best thing to show off. You have to be able to talk with passion about why you did those things, because they meant something to you. And so there's like career momentum in doing the things you love, just like there's also the satisfaction of doing the thing you love. So don't think if it is being the president of the board game club and you can't think why that is relevant to finance, that it won't help you tell a story of being passionate and excited and a leader. The what isn't as important as the why, I think, in a lot of ways.
I mean, that's really, really good advice. And just to add a little bit onto that and what Mary was saying, I assume at Vassar, not having gone there, but from what my daughter tells me, you all have a chance to be close to your professors and talk to your professors. If you're not doing that, do it. And it's not to get an A in a class, it's to have that kind of interaction, because when you get to the business world, you will be interacting in almost any regard of every aspect that we've talked about today with people who are more senior than you, that have more experience than you, very much like your professors. And the young adults that come into Goldman and work for me that are very confident and respectful and can walk right into my office and say, hey, Kath, here's the blah, blah, blah analysis. If you want me to walk you through it, you know, I remember them versus the person who's a little bit sheepish and just emails it to me and says, here's the analysis. And even the person who's sheepish and knocks on the door and says, I'm really sorry to bother you, but here's the analysis. I'm just like, just give it to me already. So having a little bit of that confidence, to Mary's point, in a nice way goes a long way. So practice that on campus. If you're afraid of President Bradley or PB, as she's known in my house, then make a goal this, you know, this year, if it's possible with COVID, to go introduce yourself to her. Something like that. Really important.
I have a piece of advice I'd add too. A question I get a lot is, what type of classes should I be taking at Vassar? How can I prepare myself for the job? And I think there's a temptation to just say, well, let me take all of the accounting and econ and math and quantitative things to build up that skill set, which sure is important, but like keep in mind that like the training element of this industry is huge. Like if you come and work for my firm, you'll spend a month before we even give you any work to do, because we expect to train you from any background you've come from. So use your time at Vassar to, you know, like Mike was saying, explore different things and take risks. And I think one of the other things that Vassar teaches you that is really hard to learn, if you're not, like Mary was saying, you know, in the mold of being a student and asking questions, being inquisitive, is the ability to generate new ideas and to work with, you know, source documents and work with the people you know and their relationships to come up with something that people are going to want to hear, and something that is different than what everybody else around you is kind of peddling and talking to their clients about. That, I think, sets people apart, and it's a really difficult thing to learn without the benefit of a place like Vassar that sort of turns you loose to just generate ideas all day long. So try and do as much of that as you possibly can.
I agree with everything that all the mentors have said, so I won't repeat. I'll keep it short. I'll just add 3 what I think are very practical and tangible suggestions. You know, back to the original question of, you know, what opportunities would I, you know, what I want to take advantage of. So, and all of these are optional. None of these are like, you must do this. Okay, so number 1 is do internships. Do not waste your summers. Do not waste your breaks. Right, you want to take on as many internships as your schedules would allow. Not only is it an enhancement to your resume and your profile, but much more importantly, it's a tool that helps you find out more about yourself, right? Find out more about what kind of environment suits you, what kind of work suits you, and then so that when you go have your job interviews or even go to your first job, I think having that context of, okay, well, I've personally tried this, and I have a reaction and thoughts around how that fits me, how I fit that environment. I think it makes you a much more compelling candidate, a much more thoughtful person. You'll come across better in interviews. You'll know yourself better and be more confident in the decisions you make. And I think, especially when I was at Vassar, I think now perhaps a little bit different, but there was a lot of my peers that didn't do anything, right? They're doing summer internships because they wanted to sort of either take it easy or go travel, which I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think, you know, I suggest all of you guys to take opportunities to take on internships, take on field work, take on any kind of these practical experiences to help enrich your background. Second suggestion, take a computer science class. It has nothing to do with how that prepares you for for a particular job or career path. But to me, I think the number 1 things you can learn in your undergraduate education is how to learn, right? And computer science classes, I think, has a very unique ability to help you develop those muscles, right? Because I think programming is all about forcing you to think about things in a logical manner, right? To look at a complex problem. I'm trying to do this, trying to write a program that solves this problem. It forces you to kind of look at that problem and break it down into compartments and then figure out sort of how to, in a very logical and organized fashion, solve those problems. And I think I took computer science classes, I did not do well, but it was really helpful to me in terms of further developing my ability to learn, my ability to face a challenging, difficult problem, something I'm not familiar with, and instead of panicking, but sort of going about it in a very organized and systematic manner. Third thing I suggest is develop your people skills, right? And at the foundation of that is communication skills. So try to find opportunities that allows you to enhance your communication skills, whether it's join a debate club or join Toastmaster or any kind of student organizations or even academic opportunities that put you in a position where you have to communicate your values and ideas, and also hear other people's ideas and be able to be effective at dialoguing and working together. I think these are skills that no matter where you go, what industry you go to, will be really helpful.
Thanks. So we're getting close to the breakout room time. So I want to provide one more opportunity for a question for all of us to answer together, and then maybe we'll switch to the breakout rooms.
We do not have another raised hand, then I will go ahead and start moving us into the breakout room.